Hello, this is Rejuvenate Your Home and Life with Rebecca. And today we have a great topic that we're going to be talking about. It is the interior design of the tabernacle and how it relates to the energies in a home, kind of like Kosher Feng Shui. So as most of you know, I am an interior designer that focuses on functionality as well as bringing balance and harmony in the home. And I have always loved this history of the interior design of the tabernacle. It happens to be the parsha that is read on the week that I was born, so I do have a special connection to it. But the interior design of the tabernacle, in Hebrew, the Mishkan, is and its function and energy is so much more in depth than what the majority of us know, and it's just beyond. So I have a very, very special guest that I am so honored to have here to answer my burning questions that I've had, and the subjects of energies, elements, the ancient tabernacle, and feng shui. So he is a world-renowned rabbi, scholar, and spiritual life coach, best-selling author with his most popular Toward a Meaningful Life, which is just absolutely amazing. Go out and get it right now, and many, many more. He's the owner of the Meaningful Life Center in Brooklyn, New York, which is New York Times says the spiritual Starbucks, and he has quite a few courses out, one of them being the Kabbalah of the Four Elements: fire, air, water, and earth, and a very popular YouTube channel with cutting-edge topics like how consciousness is born, 6 steps from the quantum supra conscious to consciousness. And he's just a very, very, very dear rabbi to me, as I have known and been following him since 2004. He is one of the most humble and loving and just brilliant leaders of our time, spiritual leaders of our time. So I am so honored to introduce Rabbi Simon Jacobson.
Thank you so much. Such glowing terms. I'm very touched, humbled, and honored to be here with you. I remember you over the years. It's been a while, but I think I should say, when it comes to spiritual connections, they transcend time and space. So I'm glad we're reconnecting.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the purpose for me wanting to reach out to you on this particular subject is there's just been a growing knowledge of energy and the need to balance it, as well as the growing trend of the ancient 3,000-year-old feng shui, which I can kind of explain, and as it compares to the ancient wisdom of Judaism and the tabernacle. And so I thought you'd be the perfect one to reach out to. So I'll just give a quick little brief description of feng shui for whoever doesn't know. I know there's going to be a lot of different listeners. So feng shui, basically, which means wind and water in Chinese, it's an ancient practice that involves looking at our environments to see how they affect us energetically. And the Chinese call this qi, but it's it has different terminology in many different languages and cultures. But basically, it's the life force energy of space, the quality of flow, and this energy. And the objects and the people in the space. So I thought you were the perfect person to ask my burning questions to. So shall we dive in?
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Okay, so I'll start with one of my favorite quotes from Einstein. One of his most popular is, everything is energy. Match the frequency of the reality that you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. And then his other popular one is energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one thing to another. So I would first love to hear your thoughts on energies of elements, things, colors, and our ability, if so, to move and balance these energies.
Absolutely. So I think to somewhat amplify on Einstein's remarks and others, to use some mystical terms and mystical language, where we understand that everything in this material world is really just the tip of the iceberg that covers up beneath the surface energy within. Just like, let's say you see me smile, the smile on my face is just an outer expression of a certain feeling of happiness or contentment within. If you see someone cry, the tears are just a physical manifestation of sadness or tears of joy. So the entire universe existence as we see it, and we do see a very narrow myopic view with our limited senses, are really just seeing the outer dimension of forces and energy within. So let's take fire and water, since you mentioned fire and water. So fire is obviously a physical entity, and so is water, but they're very different personalities. Fire rises, water falls. Fire is reddish hot. Water is whitish blue. Water cool. Fire is hot. So the Kabbalists explain that fire originates in what is called the attribute, the divine attribute of Gvura. Gvura is intensity, severity, sometimes discipline. The color red is associated with that because red is an aggressive color. That's why we use red for stop signs, for red light, because red signifies something that it gets people attention, so to speak. On the other hand, water is the attribute of chesed, of kindness and love, which flows, which is giving and flowing, with the Gvura, fire being more restraining. And that's why fire also causes things to contract, water things to expand. It's expansion. The colors associated with that are whitish blue, which are, we know, colors that soothe us and are far more calming. So if you contrast that with fire, your red, in a sense, really gets us more fiery, and bluish white calms us down. So that's not by accident. That's because the physical manifestation that we experience is really spiritual energy within. I don't know if Einstein read that or heard that, but it definitely aligned with what he says. And when you go around the entire spectrum of existence, everything is that way, literally. Everything. Whether it's the green vegetation or the yellow plants or the sun or the moon, anything you touch, from the mineral to vegetable to the animal to the human, every aspect, every fiber of existence is really just another manifestation of energy, not just molecular and atomic energy, but also spiritual energy.
Wow, so fascinating. And so you did mention like some colors in there. Do you think even just colors themselves evoke certain feelings or?
Absolutely. The colors, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole marketing in supermarkets and malls. Colors are tremendously used, as well as scents, all kinds of subliminal messages that they give to consumers where they want to attract your attention. So there's different colors draw people in different ways. So that's the manipulative side of it. But on the beautiful side, I don't know if there's a thing called color therapy. I know there's music therapy, but I would think that certain colors would definitely associate with certain feeling. Like I said, bluish white is generally considered very calming. That's why people who think about water feel calmed down and so on. Fire and water is very aggressive and definitely gets people more like, if you want to get someone fired up. So that's just on a basic level. But there's a book called The Pardes, which is called The Orchard, from the 16th century, the Kabbalist called Ramosha Cordovero, where he goes through every color and associates it with what spiritual sphere it corresponds with. So yes, I think people who you talk about interior design, would study some of the mystical or the esoteric, could probably get many ideas of how to use the color schemes simply in homes or in other structures, which can also fit certain things, more colors for a living room, certain things for a kitchen, certain things for a bedroom, etc. There's no question about it. I mean, everything has that deeper dimension.
Great, wonderful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know about that this was written in that book. Is it in English, by the way? Can it be found in English?
I I think there may be some translations. I did a class or two on the topic, so I translated some of the texts. But I don't know if there's a formal translation of the process. I'm assuming there is, but we have to go to Professor Google for that.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at that. So I think so. The second question that I had, I think you probably answered. Let's see. Yeah, it was basically about your. I know you have this amazing course, the Kabbalah of the Four Elements. And could you give us at least a summary understanding how these elements affect us, and can we use them to our benefit to create harmony in our environment? So basically what I mean by that is there a way to take some of these elements and place them, since they, I guess, emit certain frequencies or energies to create balance? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. You mentioned before the tabernacle, the temple, the sanctuary. So there, all those elements were used, because they are all part of we'll call them the four archetypes, or you can say temperaments is sometimes the word used for the four elements. So even though today scientifically we don't look at the four elements, there's a bigger elementary table, but they still are the four fundamentals that you find both in Oriental and Far Eastern, as well as Kabbalistic and other schools of thought, and see them as archetypes. So we know they are fire, wind or air, water, and earth. And if you think of them on a very basic level, we spoke about fire and water. So fire represents, we'll talk both on the positive and the negative. On the positive, fire represents passion. Fire represents spirit, a lot of energy. On the negative side, fire can represent anger and things that are associated with that. They say fiery anger, fiery rage, a raging fire. Water, on the other hand, on the positive side, represents love and kindness. It represents things that are flowing, free-flowing. But on the other side, water can also be indulgence, in the sense where people indulge in something, in a sense like where they giving into their own carnal or other desires. Same thing with the other two. Talk about wind. Wind on the positive side is, when everything needs to have wind and air, like oxygen. So air is essentially like the energy force of life, the breath of life. Neshama in Hebrew also has the meaning neshima, breath. We see how the breath is associated, the breath of life, which is an exhale and inhale movement. And the other side, air also can be something that's airy, that's hollow, that's empty. Hollow word, meaningless activity, nonsense. Just giving you the two extremes on both ends. And finally, earth is connected. The earth is the heaviest of all the elements, meaning the most gravitational. So earth on one hand is grounding something. Grounded something, you need to have like a foundation. On the other end, earth can also represent slothfulness, laziness. It can be depression, where you feel very heavy, you feel very dark. So essentially, these four temperaments, when they're properly balanced, you have them all. They all include each other, obviously. In water, you have even elements of fire, and the other two, earth and wind, and the same thing with all of them. So a balanced personality has all elements. To have passion is important, but you also have to have not crazy passion. It has to be balanced, as well as love and kindness, but that has to be disciplined. So when you think of them all four together, that creates the harmony of four temperaments that really creates the wholesome human being. And thus, when they're used, let's say in a structure of building, like the temple had things made out of mineral, which was like earth, things made out of vegetable, like things that grow, like things made out of animal, like wool and so on, and obviously human. So you bring together all four, and then you have an unbelievable synchronicity of all four elements.
Yeah. This has always been so fascinating to me, this week's parsha. So I'll also just explain too, for some listeners that may not know, a parsha is a reading that the Jewish people read every Sabbath, and it's a certain portion in the Bible that we all follow at the same time of year. And this week is in Exodus, which is Exodus 25, which is the Exodus of Egypt, when the Jewish people were freed from slavery from the miraculous hand of God. And then as they're in the desert, God speaks to Moses and speaks to him to say to the people to build for me a home, and I will dwell among you. And he also described the exact form of the home and all the vessels in detail, and said, do exactly this. And he lists these 13 types of raw materials, as Rabbi Jacobson explained some of them, and to be used. And he also mentions the directions to be placed. So that's one thing I wanted to ask you too, Rabbi Jacobson, that's a big significance in Feng Shui. And I'll get into some of the directions too of the things in the tabernacle, but do you see that there's a significance, an energetic significance in these items we'll just talk about in the tabernacle, like the direction of them? Do you see any significance in direction of energies at all?
Well, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it states clearly that for instance, the menorah, which was the candelabra that they lit every day, is always to the left, or like to the west, in the western direction. Mm-hmm. The table, which represents menorah, is fire. You know, you light fire, so it's to the left side, to the west. The shulchan, which is the table where they brought bread, is to the right, because that's bestowing. Bread is like giving, chesed, kindness. And the Mizbeach, the altar, was in the center. So there you have immediately the balance of the centrifugal balance of right, left, center, which is the key to all balance in life. The human body, right arm, left arm, the heart, everything is balanced. Every structure needs to have at least 3 legs to stand properly. And the Kabbalistic model, what you have is exactly that. You have the right, the center, and the left. The center being the spine, and the right and left are the 2 directions that are needed. So these directions are absolutely part of the whole picture. Directional energy, as you put it. So direction is more than just which direction it's facing. It's also what energy it elicits.
Wow. So fascinating. And it's also so fascinating that it correlates the same inside the human body too. And since we are probably the biggest energetic beings in our own home. Like, so our home has these energies, and the directions of things have energies, but they also correlate with us, which we have the biggest energy in our home. And so that's another thing I wanted to ask you too is, can they affect each other? So for example, I noticed that you had mentioned in one of your classes, I think I wrote it down here, and I want to read it because it's so beautiful how you put it. It was in one of your courses on air, and it said, you said something about introducing fresh air. Everything in life is static, and if there's no fresh air, it becomes a breathing ground for all types of negative forces, like an infection will fester if closed. And open to air, then it heals because of the fresh nutrients and energy. So do you think that can be the same too in our home and in our lives? Having some sort of stagnant energy in the home, or that needs to be revived or revitalized?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, on a very basic level, anyone that's a good housekeeper or keeps home will open the windows from time to time. Even if they have a nice climate control within, because you do always want to have fresh air. But on a more significant level, look, human beings thrive on constant movement and mobility, and we stagnate in stagnant air. And therefore, when it comes down to a home, you want it to be vibrant and dynamic. Let's say the children, every day, exciting activities. The last thing you want to do for a human being is create boredom and monotony that comes out of routine, because that creates stagnation. And stagnation is never a healthy force in life. Just like we need to exercise. Imagine a person just sat in a couch potato and never moved. In a sedentary position, at some point you go to atrophy and you become, God forbid, numb and paralyzed. Movement is necessary for the human being. I mean, even people who are, whatever reason, incapacitated, they're constantly trying to exercise them because the muscles need it, the blood flow is necessary. So movement is essential to life, both physically, but even more so psychologically and emotionally, which means stimulation. Look at a relationship. Relationships where people say, oh, we once loved each other and now it's really dead. We don't get stimulated. We don't get emotionally excited any longer. That's not good at all. And a human being, we need to have stimulation. We need to have freshness and something new and novel to keep things going. That's how a human being is. We get easily bored and we need to constantly refresh and revitalize our lives. Recharge, as they say. So I can't say enough about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's even one of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning is crack my window, revitalize the new energy, new air inside. So let's see. I had a few more questions. This is a good one. So coincidentally, I think the direction of all the elements in the tabernacle and the direction of the elements in the Feng Shui Bagua map, and the Feng Shui Bagua map is basically just I'm not going to get into detail of that because it's a lot, but it's basically a map on different elements that you can put in different areas of your home that represent different energies, and it kind of activates the energies in those areas. And I thought it's very interesting because it kind of correlates a little bit with the way that the tabernacle was set up. So for example, in the south of the tabernacle, so in that area you had the menorah, like you said, which is the constant fire. And in Feng Shui, it also says in that area should be fire. And then the east in the tabernacle says the table was with the burning incense that you had mentioned. And in Feng Shui, we should have wood in that area, which resembles health and new beginnings. And then just for the last two directions, just for example, west in the tabernacle was the ark and had to be made out of pure gold. And it's where the creator spoke from. And West for Feng Shui also says that it should be metal in that area, and that it's a place of creativity, to invoke creativity. And then the north was the showbread, and Feng Shui says that it should be water, which resembles life journey. So do you think that there's a resemblance here at all? I mean, I know, I know that they say Feng Shui originated in China, but I'm wondering if it somehow kind of resembles or correlates at all. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think there are certain universal principles that I find that are many different schools of thought, and they come together. I mean, there are times there are distinctions and variations and differences, but overall, those principles of north, south, east, and west are the four directions that we in Judaism refer to. I find it sometimes very fascinating because there are things I know from Judaism, then I discovered elsewhere. And I see that either they took it directly from Judaism or they discovered it because certain truths are discovered in different parts of the world at different times. And directions are a big thing. You have in the verse when Jacob is blessed by God, he says that your children and your family, your descendants will spread across the world, says to the east and to the west and to the north and to the south. Well, for us, the Yom HaVakednov, it's a Fain of a Negba. And so you have that idea. When we say Echad in Shema, which is the prayer, the most famous prayer, Echad, which means oneness, is made up of three letters. Aleph, which is oneness, unity. The Ches is 7 heavens and earth. And the Dalet is the 4 directions, which is north, south, east, and west. So to find that in that corresponds to that tabernacle, as you describe, the different disciplines are absolutely make sense and very consistent.
Wow, so fascinating. So fascinating. And I know also, like, when it's, I understand that when you're building a home on love and connecting to the creator, source energy, God, who, everybody has a different name. This is the ultimate way to keep good energy and flow, and his presence in our home, as well as affixing the mezuzot, on our doorposts and in each of our room if we're Jewish. But sometimes there still seems to be like blockages of flow sometimes. And I'm just wondering if you think that balancing these energies properly, kind of like what we've been speaking about, would be just as important, to make that a priority in our home, just as important as conscious connection with our creator. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. In Judaism and Torah, there's the concept that just as things are all united, but they also have distinction. For example, we have the Havdalah prayer. Havdalah means to separate between Shabbat and the weekdays, between the holiness and the profane. We separate. Now, separation is not meant to separate. Separation is actually the key to harmony. For example, if there was no separation between land and water, we wouldn't have existence. If there was no separation between the windpipe and the food pipe, that would be dangerous. So separations, boundaries are not a contradiction to unity. The key thing is remembering that we're not looking for a cloning. We're looking for harmony within diversity. So as much as we need that things be coordinated, we also need them to be separate. The heart and the brain are very different organs, as are the liver and the lungs and the pancreas, etc., etc. Because one has to function. But then the beautiful aspect of it is that as much as they're different, they also work together, like with one conductor of a symphony. But every part of the symphony has to play its music. Yes. So I think it's vital to understand the distinctions and the locations of things in different places. If everything wants to be everything, you're going to have destruction. You want everything to be its unique self, but then have the humility to work with others. Like in a relationship, my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, I write a line there that when you're close, when you should be distant, you'll be distant when you should be close. A relationship, as much as two people love each other and are intimately connected, they also need space. Everybody needs space. Everybody has unique individuality. Sometimes you just need your own. And that's not a contradiction. Like if someone will say, no, I love you so much, we have to be 24/7 on top of each other. No, that's not healthy. It means there's times when you're very close, but there are times when you respect each other's space. It's also part of the closeness. So it's like a dance. It's a dance of looking at individuality and balancing that with harmony. Yes. And that's the key. Individuality and unity are not a contradiction. And it's the balance that is the hard one, because sometimes people don't know whether they're crossing a boundary or maybe now it is a time to be close. So you have to really keep that balance. I mean, we call it sometimes in the context of God and the Creator, we talk about the relationship between love and reverence. So you love someone, you love God or you love another person, that's closeness. Reverence is respect for their uniqueness. In other words, you're not owning them, you're not annihilating their individuality in the name of love. And you could see in relationships, sometimes the love overwhelms the individuality, and sometimes the individuality overwhelms the love. So you need to really find the proper balance. Right.
Yeah, it's so true. They also say in Feng Shui that even everybody's home, like it's no cookie cutter solution. Like just, throw these elements here and that'll be fine. Like it's a very individual thing, and everybody's different. And then of course each
case, right.
Yeah.
Case by case. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So another question I had for you, I actually just have a couple more questions, and then I'd love if there's anything else that you want to add. But this is a very interesting question I had about, let's see, it says about the remedy of it's a very ancient tradition remedy of saging or salting one's home to remove negative energy. For example, like sage has been scientifically proven, to remove 94% of airborne bacteria, and then salt, as we know, is cleansing. So I have heard of some people doing like, bowls of salt water left out overnight and then kind of like dumping it the next day? Or do you have any thoughts on using things like this to maybe remove any negative or stagnant energy? And
Right.
maybe does it have any correlation to the incense in the tabernacle, or maybe none at all?
Absolutely. So first, I'm sure you're aware of the salting of meat. The
Mhm.
salting of meat, which is salt, is also an absorber. So
Mhm.
it absorbs,
Mhm.
and that's why it cleanses. So
Right.
salt can draw out negative energy. That's
Yeah.
why if you put salt on a wound, it
Mhm.
sometimes also dry up the wound. But also with balance. Too much salt isn't. You have to have balance. That's why in any good dish you have salt and sugar, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's no question that different substances, I guess, elements like salt or sage, as you mentioned, or other herbs or other natural elements, definitely have these powers. I can't say I'm an expert in this. I know I've read a lot about it, and I've seen pretty good collections of different elements that have. And and we're not talking about magical powers. We're talking about natural powers to
Mhm.
exude. And the same as you mentioned, scent. Look,
Mhm.
just like when we look at colors, they can elicit a reaction. Smells also elicit a reaction. Look,
Mhm.
a very disturbing smell makes us
Mhm.
repulsed. That
Right.
same smell, if you you remove the toxins, can create a perfume that is
Mhm.
very alluring and very attractive and very drawing. I mean,
Mhm.
different scents, whether it's spices or incense, as you mentioned. The temple, of course, this played a tremendous role. I remember
Mhm.
the temple was not just a matter of, yes, there was fire at the altar. There was also water. They drew water, and as well as earth. Some things were made from earth, and was the earth itself of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. And there
Mhm.
was of course, there was of course air used. That's a normal thing in anything. You have to have that, but especially some of the offerings. There were animal offerings, but there were also vegetable offerings, whether it was
Mhm.
flour or other type of offerings. They all represent elevating and releasing the energy of that particular element. Now, the incense actually, there were 11 different types of incense that
Mhm.
we used in the temple, and they all gave off a different type of aroma.
Mhm.
That was beside the fact that it created a beautiful smell in the temple. It also was a cleanser. It was also seen as a spiritual way of countering negative forces. And that's what you see whenever you see, let's say, when there's a bad odor somewhere, you
Mhm.
try to neutralize it.
Mhm.
Um, Remember, in the temple, they were bringing offerings. Maimonides writes in the Guide of the Perplexed that one of the reasons for the incense was to neutralize the negative odors. But it's a lot deeper than that. It
Mhm.
meant it's also neutralizing and cleansing the negative energies
Huh.
that can come out of different situations. Because remember, at the end of the day, the temple was a place, a sanctuary to bring God into our lives.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line. I think it's critical to point out. There's a
Mhm.
purpose to all of this. The details are the way we did it, but the overall purpose was to use all our sense of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, and in every way to use it as an opportunity to become channels or vehicles for transcendence and for divine experience. That's
Yeah.
what the purpose of the temple.
Mhm.
So to do that, we have to use every aspect of human experience, which includes, as I said, sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, including incense, including the different elements we spoke about: fire, water, and
Mhm.
earth, and wind or air.
Mhm.
And the same thing affecting domim, semeh, chemadaber, mineral, vegetable, animal, and man. So the entire spectrum was covered in the temple, and all of it guided and directed toward creating a dwelling place, a home for the divine in this world.
Mhm.
This world consists of all the elements. So if you're just covering, let's say, things that are that we see or hear and not what we smell, you're missing a key element.
Mhm. And so do you think that the more that I mean, obviously we'll never until we have another Beit Mikdash, or um, do you think that we could at least try to, um, well, I guess you kind of already answered this in the previous questions, that it would be both, not only just connecting with the creator and obviously building our home on love, but also, utilizing, these energies and placement. So there was just one or two more. One more question.
Let me say this. I think this is important.
Sure.
The Shalah, Rabbi Yitzhak Horowitz, a great middle-aged scholar, he writes that in the verse in this week's chapter that talks about the building of the temple, it says, "Build for me a sanctuary, a holy place, v'shachanti b'seicham, and I will rest among you."
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, the sentence seems strange. Build me a sanctuary, then you should say, I will dwell in it. Where's the you? Among you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
You're referring to a building.
Sorry,
you don't hear me?
Yeah, it just broke up just for a second. If you could just repeat what you just said.
Yeah. So the verse says, "Build for me a sanctuary, I will dwell among you." So it should say, I will dwell in it, not among you.
Mm-hmm.
And the explanation that he gives, that's quoted very often, is because the purpose of the temple was not dwelling in a building, it was dwelling in the hearts and souls of every man and woman and child.
Oh,
so that's why God said, "Build me a sanctuary and I will dwell in you." So in other words, even though we don't have a physical temple now, we have a spiritual temple, which is you and I and every person. That means you, all your being and all your senses that we're discussing, sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, and all your parts, your fire, your water, your air, your earth, all have to be permeated with the divine presence.
Wow.
And that's why simulating all the senses is so important. So when you're building, let's say, a home, and I'm sure you know this, interior design, it's not just the object, it's also the smell, it's also the feel, the look and feel. It's more than just, it's the spirit. And creating these physical items and putting them in the right locations, all of it adds up to creating that home for God in your life, in your heart and soul.
Wow, so beautiful. I want to end on that because that was just so perfect. It was like such a beautiful, perfect summary. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Sure.
But I do have like just 1.5 more burning questions, if that's okay. Are you on time? Okay. Okay, so this is a very interesting question, but I'm dying to ask you, burning to ask you, I should say. So Feng Shui has this idea of a negative financial block, as I have heard it said, and on your home because of a status or a condition of the home or the people that were in the home prior to the one moving in. And I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this? Because people have really, like, once they actually did certain remedies in the home, they literally felt the financial block lift. And we're talking about hundreds of people that have lots of different experiences with this. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on this? Is this possible? And like, for example, in the Jewish tradition, we have the Hanukkah Tabayit. And I'm wondering if that or our mezuzot have the power to kind of wipe off these like very serious negative blocks or financial blocks that people may have. Just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, let me just give you a general thought about the concept of what we call an ayin hara, an evil eye or negative forces. Just remember, there's an expression that negative forces only affect those that believe in them, those that give them power. So in Judaism, there's no such concept as being trapped or being a victim of circumstances where some other force is controlling your life. Yes, there are negative forces out there, but if you don't give them power, you can deal with anything. So at the same time, obviously, we try to, like you said, a mezuzah on the door and do other things that create positive energy. That's for sure the case. But I just want to not over exaggerate the case of negative energy as if it's going to control your destiny. Because some people feel that's what happens. There's something negative, and I need someone to eliminate the devil or that negative force. So I don't subscribe to that approach. I would say you can have predispositions. There are things that are positive energy and negative energy, but that doesn't mean that they control you. So what we do is, there's no question, we do certain things in a home. For example, creating a beautiful home is going to create a container for beautiful blessings. If you're arguing in your home, obviously you're creating negative energy. But that's up to us. So even though, yes, you may go into a home that was perhaps occupied by someone before you that maybe, let's say they were very dysfunctional or they had other negative stuff. So there's a limit of how much it can affect you. If you can do certain things to so-called, just like if somebody lived in your home and they left a wreck and a mess, or they you need to repair that, by all means. So even if you feel, but I think the biggest thing is to bring joy and happiness and love into a home. That's the biggest counterforce. Yes, a mezuzah can help, and perhaps certain herbs or certain aromas can also help create a more beautiful, but it has to be a combined element. I think it's a little childish to say, okay, here's a negative energy, here's the counterforce. It's not a magic pill that solves these issues.
So for example, if the home was built on, let's say there was, like it was built on a I don't know, like a financial issue, or is there any way that energy could go into? You're saying that only if you know about it and are worried about it and believe in it, or do you think that, or like if those energies cannot be translated or transferred unless you believe it? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying if you're giving too much credence and power to your enemy or to negative energy, then it gives you're feeding it. You shouldn't be feeding it. You move into a home, even if let's say the home was owned by a criminal before, so you have to now bring beauty into the home and beauty love. The criminal does not control your life.
Yeah.
No, that's my point. So you have to now bring beautiful elements into the home and so on. There's not going to, Jewish thinking does not include this. I mean, there are ideas of amulets and other things that some people say counter negative forces, but that has to be done with a lot of discretion, with a lot of direction, because sometimes that can be perceived as magical and almost like sorcery and stuff like that. And Judaism is very careful when it comes to things like that. We don't believe in magical potions and magical solutions. Yes, we believe in bringing the love and beauty into the home. Putting a mezuzah on the door, that's a mitzvah. To put a mezuzah, that brings sanctity into your home. Just like other things bring sanctity. But you don't need to have extra things. I mean, to have in a home, for example, a prayer book, a Torah, and a charity box is very strongly recommended, because that brings positive energy in every room. Yes, that's what a lot of people do. Or in general, a house filled with books, especially holy books. This all creates holiness and brings sanctity to your home.
Yeah. And I definitely feel it too when in my home, when I see these things, and when I go into other people's homes too. So thank you for that. And so my last question is, do you think that we can consciously activate abundance in our lives?
Well, as you see from my approach, I generally do not believe in magic tricks and in secret potions or pressing certain buttons. You generate abundance by being an abundant spirit. When you allow yourself to experience joy, expansiveness, and open-mindedness, that becomes a container that opens up, that blessings will enter. If a person is very narrow and stingy and fearful and driven by fear, you are becoming your own worst enemy. Because even if God wants to give you a blessing of abundance, your container is too small.
Right.
That's why you need to be joyous. When the person says, if I had more things in my life, I'd be happier. And the response is, if you're happier, you have more things in your life.
Exactly.
That's your attitude. So for somebody to have a negative attitude, then they think they're going to go buy a product that's going to bring them abundance. It doesn't work that way. Abundance responds to abundance. You have an abundant spirit. You're a giving person.
Yeah.
You're charitable. You're kind. That attracts abundance.
Right.
That's how it works. That's how God works.
Beautiful. That's and when I said abundance too, I meant like in all areas of our lives, and abundance in health and in happiness, all the good things.
It all comes down to what containers. Listen, God has the final say, but we have to make the containers.
Yes.
When you, yeah, I also meant that. I didn't just mean abundance and wealth. I meant it in every possible way. But you have to have that approach. You have to have, if you're going to come and ask somebody for a blessing, and they say, and you come without anything to hold that blessing, a basket, a container, what's going to happen? They'll give you the blessing, it'll spill on the floor. The same thing here. Any abundance, whether it's health, you need to have an attitude that you're ready to receive that all. I find many people, they want the abundance, whatever it may be, but they're not doing what they have to do to be open to it.
Right. To be the abundance. Be the abundance yourself already, right?
Expression, think good and it will be good. When you think good, it creates goodness.
Yes. Yes, I'm into that. So true. Rabbi Jacobson, this has been so wonderful catching back up with you. And I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to answer all my crazy questions and shed some light on these very interesting and very deep subjects. So thank you so much.
None of them were crazy. They were all beautiful questions. I thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for honoring me, and thank you for reconnecting. And my biggest hope is that this will help your listeners, and I commend you for doing this, will help your listeners to actually build a sanctuary of their own lives, their own homes, and their own hearts and souls for something greater than themselves, for the transcendent, for the divine. That's the ultimate goal.
So beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much. Chodesh Tov, and hope to talk to you again very soon.
Chodesh Tov, it's a Chodesh of joy.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.